We're at stand 4 of the Mac Lake Staff Ride, and as we talked about in stand 3, the Crane Lake Prescribed Fire has jumped Highway 33. It's fully established on the east side of Highway 33, pushed by a west wind, and it is running directly at the Mac Lake subdivision, most likely a full-on, fully developed crown fire at that point. Here on the north flank is Jim Swiderski, who's operating the John Deere 450 dozer, and then 2 personnel on the 6x6 engine. So you only have 3 people out here on this north flank, 1 engine, 1 dozer. And initially, the dozer started plowing line north of the power line that we were just at, and the engine was behind the dozer, supporting them. They were working slightly indirect because of the intensity of the flame front on the fire. At some point between stand 3 and stand 4, the dozer picked up its plow and tried to reposition just slightly to the north. So there was a gap in the plow line. At that point, there was no radio communication between the dozer and the engine, but there was eye contact. The dozer operator was just repositioning. The 6x6 thought that the operator was moving over so they could pass because they were moving a little faster. And you have to remember what the 6x6 was doing was pushing through timber, which is similar to this. So they weren't on a road, they weren't on a dozer trail that was easy for them to move through. They were literally running over these small jack pine trees, trying to put water on the fire now that they were in front of the dozer. The dozer re-engaged his plow behind the 6x6 engine, and again, there was no radio communication as they moved to the east. At the same time, the incident commander at this point, not the burn boss, had ordered resources, local volunteer fire departments, Michigan DNR, multiple law enforcement agencies, more Forest Service resources, all of which were focused primarily on trying to protect the Mac Lake subdivision because it was very clear the fire was moving that direction, and it was moving fast. There's only about a mile between this point and the Mac Lake subdivision. The rate of spread of this fire was in miles per hour. So you had minutes, not hours, literally, to get positioned to try to defend the subdivision. So as the 2 resources worked this way to the east, flanking the fire, the 6x6 engine realized the fire was making a run at them. They disengaged from the fire and they moved to the north through timber like this to try to get away from that flame front. They radioed that they were disengaging from the fire. There was never any contact back from Jim Swiderski on the dozer to acknowledge or that he heard that radio transmission, and so there was no communication between them. So again, the fire jumped about 12:30 onto this side of the highway, and by 1 o'clock the incident commander started to try to call Jim because he wanted to reposition Jim's dozer to help defensively protect the Mac Lake subdivision. He was not able to get hold of Jim, and so at approximately 1 o'clock he asked a firefighter to start looking for Jim and start coming up this tractor line to see if he could find Jim and make contact with him and get him to reposition. Shortly thereafter, they also asked the spotter plane to help locate the dozer. There was some confusion between the Mayo U.S. Forest Service dozer and the Mayo DNR dozer. So there are 2 different units, both based in the town of Mayo, but different agencies. And as they worked through, what they eventually found is with the help of the plane, Jim's dozer was found approximately at this point. It had been burned over. And then with more searching by 1500 in the afternoon, they found Jim's body to the northeast, 276 feet away from his dozer. In between him and the dozer were items such as his hard hat, his keys, candy bars, glasses. Jim was not found with a fire shelter, so there was no evidence of his fire shelter being deployed. They never found it. They didn't find it on the dozer. They didn't find it out in the woods. So it's unknown what happened there. Clearly, Jim disengaged the fire. There was no plow line for several hundred feet to the point where his dozer was at its final spot. So he had disengaged his plow, moved away from the fire line, and then realized he needed to move faster than that, got off the dozer and ran. Unfortunately, he was burned over. either from the fire going from a flanking fire to a head fire, or some have theorized that it was a horizontal roll vortex, that, you know, with all that convective energy, that you really had fire roll over and either hot gases and or fire get him. So so very tragic event. No one was able to get a hold of him to tell him to back off of this situation, and of course he didn't have a spotter at the time. His spotter had left, so there wasn't another person with a radio that could have served as a lookout or a communications person for him.